On my wedding day, my father refused to walk me down the aisle. "I'll only walk my real daughter down the aisle," he said, referring to my golden little sister. Ironically, it was at her lavish wedding that the scandal that destroyed our family's reputation began, all with a simple envelope I handed to the groom. How could I have known that a single envelope, delivered out of revenge, would not only destroy my sister's wedding, but also expose secrets that would forever tarnish our family's name in New York high society? "I'll only walk my real daughter down the aisle," my father had said on that March Sunday, leaving me alone at the doors of St. Ignatius Loyola on Park Avenue. 7 years of resentment later, I would finally have my revenge at the lavish wedding of Marina, my golden little sister, but the price to be paid would be far greater than I ever imagined. There are moments that divide your life into before and after. For me, it was that Sunday morning, standing in front of the mirror in the small sacristy of St. Ignatius Loyola. My wedding dress, white, simple, bought on sale, felt as insignificant as I did in that place. "It's almost time, sweetie. Your father is on his way." My mother adjusted my veil with her perpetually nervous hands, while I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. Something was wrong. Dad should have been here 20 minutes ago. In his entire methodical life as a successful businessman, he had never been late for anything. That's when the door opened. It wasn't him, but my Aunt Carol, with that look I knew so well, pity mixed with a secret pleasure in someone else's misfortune. "Louisa, my dear, your father sent a message. He's not coming. He said," she hesitated, licking her thin lips like someone savoring a forbidden dessert, "that he'll only walk his real daughter down the aisle." It felt like a punch to the gut. The air simply vanished from my lungs. My father's words, delivered by that woman's mouth, fell on me like stones. Marina, my younger sister, the real daughter. And I was the second-class daughter, the mistake, the walking disappointment. But the worst was yet to come, the murmur of the guests as they realized the scandal. Paul, my fiancé, and his brother tried to save the situation. "I'll walk you down the aisle," my future brother-in-law offered, already adjusting his suit jacket. But something inside me had shattered for good. As I walked down that aisle, feeling the stares of pity and the poorly disguised whispers, I swore to myself that one day my father would bitterly regret this moment. Who could have imagined that this silent oath would consume me for 7 long years? Our apartment in Astoria, Queens, was nothing compared to my parents' mansion on the Upper East Side. A 1-bedroom, decorated with furniture from Wayfair and a few pieces from thrift stores that Paul and I painted on weekends. "Cozy," we called it. "Tiny," my mother would whisper on her rare visits, as if the walls might take offense. With a degree in psychology, I opened my practice in a commercial building on 30th Avenue, 3 blocks from home. It was ironic how I, unable to heal my own wounds, specialized in family trauma. My patients loved my unique sensitivity for understanding parental rejection. If only they knew that each of their stories fed my own resentment like fuel to a fire. Visits to my parents' house were calculated like military operations. Christmas, my mother's birthday, and rarely anything more. Marina was always there, of course, with her success stories, photos in the society pages, her super important job at an NGO, funded by Dad, obviously. I would smile, ask about her life, while inwardly I imagined 1,000 ways to show everyone who the real daughter truly was. Paul tried to convince me to let it go. "Honey, you need to move on. This grudge is eating you up." He didn't understand. How could he? An only child, loving parents, a lifetime of being the center of someone's universe. My father's contempt was a thorn I couldn't, or perhaps secretly didn't want to, remove. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday. "Hello, Louisa. It's Mom. Your sister is getting married. To Grayson Vanderbilt, son of the owner of Vanderbilt Enterprises. Can you believe it?" Her voice was overflowing with pride. The wedding of the century, the golden child with the perfect match. I hung up the phone with a trembling hand, a strange smile on my lips. Why did that news, which should have made me happy for my sister, ignite such a dark and tempting idea in me? I spent 3 sleepless nights researching Grayson Vanderbilt online, heir to the second-largest development corporation in New York, photos at charity events, a few suspicious business lawsuits that never went anywhere. On the surface, the son-in-law of their dreams. But something about that too-perfect smile in his Instagram photos bothered me. Was he too good to be true? Or was I just desperate to find something wrong with my golden sister's fiancé? It was a casual comment from a patient. My husband saw your sister's fiancé at an underground poker game in Atlantic City, you know? Betting big, drinking top shelf. That planted the first seed. How did she know about my sister's engagement? New York City, a small town for big gossip. It didn't matter. What mattered was this first crack in the perfect facade of Marina's Prince Charming. I need someone discreet, efficient, and who doesn't ask questions. I was sitting in a nondescript coffee shop in Murray Hill, far from my neighborhood, far from anywhere my family frequented. Frank, an ex-cop with a face that had seen it all, just raised an eyebrow. "It's gonna cost you, Doc." I pushed an envelope with half the payment under the table. "I want to know everything about Grayson Vanderbilt." "Absolutely everything." That night, sitting at the bank, I signed the contract for a second mortgage on our apartment. "Are you sure about this, ma'am?" "It's a considerable amount," the manager commented, adjusting his glasses. I wanted to laugh. Sure? I was mortgaging our only property to investigate my sister's fiancé out of pure resentment. Of course I wasn't sure. I was obsessed. "I'm taking a specialization course." I lied to Paul about the money. "It'll help me land some high-profile clients." He hugged me, proud, telling me how much I deserved to invest in myself. Guilt gnawed at me, mixed with a feverish excitement I couldn't control. The plan was in motion. I had no idea the price we would all pay for it. The invitation arrived in a scented box, imported paper with gold-embossed letters. "Mr. and Mrs. Anthony Miller request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their daughter Marina to Mr. Grayson Vanderbilt." I stared at it as if it were a bomb about to explode on my coffee table. The phone rang shortly after. "Louisa, darling, you have to be part of the preparations. It's your sister," my mother insisted, completely ignoring that 7 years earlier, I wasn't even granted a father to walk me down the aisle. The first meeting with Marina after the announcement was at a cafe in the shops at Columbus Circle. As elegant as ever, my sister seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Lou, I've missed you. You disappeared." I smiled, trying to look natural. How could I explain that I hadn't disappeared? I had simply distanced myself from the place where I was never truly welcome. "Work, you know. But tell me everything about the wedding." As Marina talked about flowers, bands, and dresses from Paris, I observed the differences between us. Her, with her discreet but expensive jewelry, a designer handbag, and the effortless air of someone who's never had to worry if her credit card would be approved. Me, with my blazer bought on sale, striving to look successful. It wasn't envy I felt. It was a bitter sense of injustice that had been building for decades. "Dad is so excited. He hired the best caterer in New York. There's going to be French champagne. You have no idea." Marina spoke like a child on Christmas Eve. I felt a pang thinking of my own wedding. Appetizers from Costco and a supermarket sheet cake, cheap wine, all paid for by Paul and me. "I'm so happy for you," I lied, smiling. She believed me, of course. Marina always believed the world was a good and fair place. Poor thing. The engagement party at the New York Yacht Club was the first major ordeal. "We are so proud of Marina and Grayson, a union that enriches our family," my father declared in his toast, champagne flute raised, without even glancing in my direction. Paul squeezed my hand under the table, trying to comfort me. If only he knew that while everyone was applauding, I was studying Grayson's every move, every look, every gesture. The Prince Charming had already had 5 glasses of scotch in less than 2 hours. Interesting. Frank's first report arrived, tucked inside a psychology journal. Grainy photos showed Grayson entering an underground poker game in a warehouse in Queens, not Atlantic City as my patient had mentioned. "Goes at least 3 times a week. Already lost over $50,000 in a single night," the note read. I felt a mix of satisfaction and apprehension. I had found the first crack, but would it be enough? It was easier than I imagined to get closer to him. All it took was mentioning during a family lunch that I was treating a patient with a gambling addiction. "Fascinating how that addiction works, isn't it?" I commented casually, watching him swallow hard, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Our eyes met for a second. His, suspicious. Mine, innocently smiling. Grayson's debts were just the tip of the iceberg. The second report revealed his connections to a city councilman involved in kickback schemes, meetings in private dining rooms, conversations in cars with tinted windows. He works as a middleman, Frank explained. Connects developers willing to pay with politicians willing to sell favors. The secret apartment in Tribeca was the most surprising discovery. A flat in a discreet building, paid for in cash, where Grayson held meetings that didn't appear on his official schedule. Frank managed to get photos of the place. Expensive scotch, a rarely used bed, a safe built into the wall. "I need to know what's in that safe," I demanded, ignoring Frank's concerned look. "That's gonna cost extra, Doc, and we're getting into dangerous territory now." That night, looking at the photos spread across my desk after hours, I felt a strange vertigo. Was I really doing this? Invading the privacy of a man I barely knew? Risking my career, my marriage, maybe even my freedom? All for revenge? Or was it to protect my sister? Both, maybe? I put the photos away when I heard a knock on the door. My secretary telling me my next patient had arrived. Ironic how I helped other people deal with their demons while feeding my own. "Louisa, dear, it's so good to see you more involved with the wedding." My mother seemed genuinely happy to see me helping with the invitation samples. I smiled, playing my part to perfection. What she didn't know was that every visit to my parents' house was a reconnaissance mission. Every casual conversation an opportunity to gather intelligence. Earning Marina's trust was surprisingly easy. My sister, always so perfect in the eyes of others, was desperate for someone who would actually listen to her. "You're the only one who doesn't just praise everything, Lou. Everyone else just tells me what I want to hear," she confessed, while we were choosing shoes for the bridesmaids. I felt a pang of guilt that I quickly suffocated. This was no time for sentimentality. "Will you be my maid of honor? I know we've drifted apart, but you're my sister." Marina's request caught me off guard during lunch. I accepted, of course. It was the perfect position to observe everything up close. "I'm so proud of you," she said, holding my hands across the table. Her sincere smile made my stomach churn. For a moment, I almost gave up on everything. Almost. The casual encounters with Grayson were carefully planned. A stop by his office to drop off a message from Marina. A quick coffee to discuss the surprise I was supposedly preparing for the wedding. He was charming, articulate, exactly as he appeared to be, but I had learned to see the signs, the subtle restlessness, the way his eyes checked his phone every 5 minutes, the slight tremor in his hand after hours without a drink. "Doc, your secretary, Denise, is the second cousin of Bobby, Grayson's personal bodyguard. The information from Frank was a godsend. I cultivated a friendship with Denise, sharing confidences, earning her trust. My cousin says his boss has a pretty hectic life," she commented after a few margaritas. "Apparently not even the fiancé knows everything." I smiled, asking for more details. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together perfectly, almost too perfectly. My parents' Upper East Side mansion was decorated like a Christmas movie set. Lights everywhere, a 12-foot tree in the main living room, arrangements of red and white flowers on every available surface. Paul and I arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, not a minute early or late. My punctuality was a small rebellion. Dad always said that people with class arrive fashionably late. "Louisa, Paul, so glad you could make it." Marina greeted us at the door, hugging us effusively. Grayson stood beside her, his smile impeccable, his hair perfectly coiffed. If I didn't know what was going on behind that facade, I would have believed the image of the perfect couple. "Come in, come in." Dad is eager to show off the new wine cellar. The Christmas Eve dinner unfolded like a well-rehearsed play, my father dominating the conversation, my mother agreeing with his every word, Marina glowing from her engagement, and me, the observant psychologist, smiling at the right moments, asking the appropriate questions. "And how are the patients, Louisa?" my father asked, feigning interest. "Rich and disturbed as always, Dad. Just like our family, except they pay me to listen." The comment drew a stunned silence, broken only by my mother's nervous laugh. It happened after dessert. My father called for quiet, pulled a small blue velvet box from his pocket, and handed it to Marina. "These jewels belong to your grandmother, my mother. I always promised they would go to the first daughter to carry on the family name with a worthy marriage." I watched Marina open the box. Inside lay the sapphire and diamond set that I had been told my whole life would one day be mine. My sister looked genuinely embarrassed, shooting me an apologetic glance. I smiled, raising my glass. "To family tradition," I toasted, as something icy grew inside my chest. Later, in the kitchen, as I helped my mother with the dishes, I allowed her to see a sliver of my hurt. "Those jewels, you know Dad always said they would be mine." Mom sighed, avoiding my gaze. "Your grandmother wanted them to be yours, yes. But your father, he has very fixed ideas about certain things. Don't take it personally." Not take it personally? It was entirely personal, a clear message about my value in the family hierarchy. In that moment, any doubt I had about my plan dissolved like mist in the sun. Frank's report arrived in an encrypted email. "Subject of interest found. We need to talk in person." We met in a quiet corner of Bryant Park, a neutral place, full of tourists and far from my family's radar. Claire Evans, 29, his executive assistant for the past 5 years. They've been having an affair for at least 3. I looked at the photos. A pretty, ordinary-looking woman leaving the secret apartment in Tribeca. Nothing surprising so far. She's pregnant. 4 months from what I could gather. Frank seemed uncomfortable, as if even for him, a man who'd seen it all as a cop, this was too much. "Are you sure it's his?" I asked, trying to maintain my professional calm. "Positive. I have recordings of them arguing about it in the apartment. He wants her to take care of the problem. She's refusing." I spent days observing Claire from a distance. Her routine was simple. From work to a modest apartment in the East Village. A few visits to her mother in a similar neighborhood on weekends. She didn't seem like a social climber or a homewrecker. She just seemed exhausted. A woman carrying a secret far too heavy to bear alone. On one of those days, our surveillance almost went wrong. She looked directly at the car where I was parked, as if she could feel my presence. I ducked down quickly, my heart racing. At home that night, I found myself playing out different scenarios. I could just show the proof to Marina, end the wedding before it even happened. It would be quick, efficient, and completely unsatisfying. Where was the art in a private revenge? No, I wanted more. I wanted my father to feel what it was like to be publicly humiliated, exactly as he had done to me. Claire's pregnancy was a weapon too powerful to be wasted in a private confrontation. I organized a red folder with all the evidence, photos, reports, even transcripts of conversations recorded in the Tribeca apartment. "What's all this?" Paul asked, catching me by surprise as I worked in my home office late one night. "Material for a complicated case," I answered, not entirely lying. He kissed the top of my head, his brow furrowed with concern over the dark circles under my eyes. "Don't wear yourself out over other people's problems, honey." If only he knew that these weren't other people's problems, but the very fuel for my own obsession. Would Paul still love me if he knew this dark side of me? The discovery was accidental. Frank had been following Grayson's money trail when he found a strange pattern. Large sums being transferred to a shell company which, after a deeper investigation, was linked to my own father's real estate ventures. "I don't think your dad is just the father-in-law," Frank explained, showing me the documents. "Looks like he's the real mastermind behind the financial schemes." I spent an entire week analyzing the data, connecting the dots, following the money, the transfers, the ghost companies, the business meetings disguised as family dinners. It all made a terrible kind of sense now. My father hadn't chosen Grayson for Marina because he was a good match. He had chosen him because he needed someone inside the family to continue his illicit schemes. Someone malleable, indebted, and desperate for status and money. "Are you okay, Dr. Miller?" Denise asked one morning when I arrived at the office with bloodshot eyes after a sleepless night. "Just tired," I replied automatically. How could I explain the hurricane inside me? The discovery didn't just complicate my plan, it transformed it completely. It was no longer about humiliating the man who rejected me as his daughter, but about exposing a criminal enterprise that could send my own father to prison. That night, in the shower, I finally let the tears come. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a deep, primal rage. For how many years had this man preached about integrity, honesty, and family tradition? How many times had he criticized me for questionable choices like my simple wedding and my less than prestigious profession? All that time, he was nothing but a hypocrite, a white-collar criminal hiding behind the facade of a respectable patriarch. The decision wasn't easy, but it was final. I had come too far to turn back now. The plan would proceed, but with a larger target. Not only would Marina's wedding be ruined, but so would the immaculate reputation my father had spent decades building. "How far are you going to take this?" I asked my reflection in the fogged-up mirror. The woman staring back at me, with cold, determined eyes, no longer seemed like the same person who had once dreamed of that man's approval. She looked like someone far more dangerous. The wedding rehearsal at St. Ignatius Loyola was a spectacle of tension disguised as celebration. Nervous bridesmaids trying to coordinate their steps. The father of the bride obsessively checking his watch. The groom with a fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. And Marina, my golden little sister, visibly on the verge of a breakdown, smiling mechanically while her hands trembled, clutching the rehearsal bouquet. "Marina, are you okay? You look pale," I asked when we finally got a moment alone in the sacristy. She tried to hold the smile, but it crumbled like a house of cards. Suddenly, her shoulders began to shake, and she covered her face with her hands. "I can't breathe, Lou," she managed to say between sobs. I immediately recognized the signs. She was having a panic attack. I guided her to a chair, speaking in a low, calm voice, using the techniques I applied with my patients. "Breathe with me. That's it." Slowly, gradually, her breathing returned to normal, but silent tears continued to fall. "What's going on, Mari?" I asked, genuinely concerned. For a moment, I completely forgot about my plan, my revenge. All I saw was my little sister, scared and needing help. "It's too much pressure," she finally said, dabbing at her tears, careful not to smudge her makeup. "Everyone expecting perfection. Dad has invested so much in this wedding. The expectations. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in floral arrangements and guest lists." She paused, looking down at her hands. "You're lucky, you know, to have escaped this life, to have chosen your own path." Her words hit me like a slap. Lucky? Me? The one who was rejected, humiliated, treated like a second-class daughter? But looking at her in that moment, so fragile beneath the layer of imposed perfection, I realized something shocking. Marina was a victim too, a gilded prisoner in our father's suffocating expectations. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to," I whispered, holding her hands. She looked at me with surprise, then with resignation. "Of course I do, Lou. It's what everyone expects of me. It's what they've always expected." I didn't expect the frantic knock on my door at 11:40 p.m. Paul was already asleep, exhausted after a day of grading papers. I opened it cautiously. Marina was there, her hair disheveled, her eyes red, in a state I would never have associated with my always impeccable sister. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice choked. I didn't know where else to go. We sat on the small balcony of my apartment, 2 mugs of chamomile tea between us. The night was pleasantly mild, typical of a New York autumn. "I found things in Grayson's office," she finally said, opening her purse and pulling out a few papers. "I don't really understand what they mean, but..." Her lost expression broke my heart. "I think something is wrong with his business." I examined the documents, trying to look surprised. They were bank statements from one of the shell companies Frank had already identified. "How did you get these?" I asked, genuinely curious. Marina sighed. "He's been acting strange, distant. The day before yesterday, he left his briefcase at home. I know I shouldn't have looked, but..." She paused. "When I asked him about it, he got furious, said I shouldn't meddle in things I don't understand. Then, he threatened me." "Threatened you how?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. "He said that if I told anyone, especially Dad, there would be consequences for the whole family." Marina swallowed hard. "Lou, I'm scared to cancel the wedding. Dad has invested so much, invited so many important people." She was trembling. Here was my perfect chance. My sister was already suspicious, she already had proof. All it would take was a little push, and my elaborate plan would be unnecessary. But something inside me hesitated. "Mari, listen," I said, taking her trembling hands in mine. "You're not alone." Before I could continue, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on instinct. "Dr. Miller, this is Ada Roberts with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Frank gave us your contact." I froze. Frank had actually sent our findings to a prosecutor? "We need to speak with you urgently about the material we received. It's more serious than we imagined." I looked at Marina, who was watching me with wide eyes. The universe had just made the decision for me. The morning of the wedding arrived with an impeccably blue sky, as if even the weather had been custom ordered by my father. At the Upper East Side mansion, there was a frantic buzz of activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, florists adding the final touches. I observed it all with a strange detachment, as if I were watching a movie, not participating in it. "You look stunning," I said with sincerity when I saw Marina ready. The French lace gown was a dream, her hair swept into an elegant updo adorned with small diamond flowers. Grandmother's jewels, of course. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for being here, Lou," she said quietly. "After last night, I thought you'd try to convince me to call it off." I didn't answer. How could I explain that after the prosecutor's call, I'd spent the entire night reevaluating the plan, adjusting the details? Roberts had been clear. "We're putting together an operation, but we need a few more hours. These are powerful people. We have to get them all at once." The irony wasn't lost on me. My personal revenge had morphed into a federal operation. The wedding would happen, yes, but it would end very differently than anyone imagined. St. Ignatius Loyola was packed. 600 people, according to the event planner, all wearing their finest clothes, showing off their most expensive jewelry and their fakest smiles. I spotted politicians, CEOs, socialites, a who's who of New York society gathered in one place. How many of them were involved in my father's and Grayson's schemes? How many knew something and kept quiet out of convenience? Suddenly, all that opulence seemed obscene. The moment arrived. The wedding march began to play. The great doors swung open, and there was Marina, radiant on our father's arm. Anthony Miller, respected businessman, exemplary patriarch, sophisticated criminal, walked proudly, leading his favorite daughter to the altar, exactly as he had refused to do for me 7 years ago. The envelope felt heavy in the inner pocket of my bridesmaid's dress. The ADA had been specific. "Don't do anything until the end of the ceremony. We need everyone gathered at the reception." But as I watched them, a dangerous idea began to form in my mind. The grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel had never looked so stunning. Crystal chandeliers reflected the golden light. Monumental arrangements of white orchids adorned every table, and waiters circulated with trays of French champagne. 500 guests, strategically seated according to their social importance. It wasn't a celebration of love, but of power and appearances. Exactly what my father valued most. I watched it all from my seat at the head table, feeling like a spy in enemy territory. Paul, beside me, was uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. "How much do you think all of this cost?" he whispered, impressed. I smiled without answering. It cost far more than he could ever imagine, and not just in money. The real price would be paid soon enough, in ruined reputations and shattered family ties. It was during dinner that I noticed the strange commotion at the entrance to the ballroom. A woman was arguing with the security guards, who were trying to discreetly prevent her from entering. Even from a distance, I recognized her immediately. Claire, Grayson's pregnant assistant. A chill ran down my spine. This was not part of the plan. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not yet. The guards finally managed to lead her away, but the damage was done. Grayson had seen her. His demeanor changed instantly. He began to drink more heavily, champagne flutes replaced by glasses of scotch. His answers became clipped, his gaze restless, constantly darting back to the entrance. Marina noticed, of course. I saw the concern grow on her face, the forced smiles, the whispered questions to her husband that were met with impatience. The perfect storm was brewing right before my eyes, without me having to do a thing. The time for the groom's speech was approaching. I touched the envelope in my pocket, undecided. The ADA had told me to wait, not to interfere. But what if I just handed the evidence to Grayson now? Let the panic do the work for me? I looked at Marina, at my father, at the smiling guests. The resentment that had simmered for years was boiling inside me. No one here had cared about my humiliation 7 years ago. Why should I care about theirs now? A toast to the bride and groom. The master of ceremonies' voice echoed through the hall. It was the cue for Grayson's speech. He rose to his feet, swaying slightly, his face flushed from the alcohol, his eyes clouded. I realized I wouldn't need to hand him any envelope. The man was about to implode all on his own. Anthony, sensing his son-in-law's state, tried to intervene discreetly, touching his arm. "Perhaps I should speak first," he suggested with a tense smile. It was the perfect trigger. Grayson shook his arm free from his father-in-law's grip, knocking over a crystal glass that shattered on the floor. The sharp sound of breaking glass cast a momentary silence over the ballroom. "No, no, dearest father-in-law," he said, his voice too loud. "I think it's time for me to speak. After all, it's my wedding, isn't it? Or is this just another one of your investments?" I saw the panic in my father's eyes, the shock on my mother's face. Marina froze in her seat, her hands clutching the linen napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white. The guests, sensing the imminent drama, leaned forward in their chairs. New York loves a good scandal, especially when it involves the rich and powerful. "Here's to the great Anthony Miller." Grayson raised his glass in a sarcastic toast. "The man who taught me everything about how to siphon off millions, how to buy politicians, how to build a flawless reputation while wading neck-deep in filth." The words fell like bombs in the silent hall. I saw some guests exchange nervous glances, while others discreetly pulled out their phones, probably to record the moment. And here's to the perfect family, built on lies and appearances. Security guards began to move in, but it was too late. The bomb had already gone off. "Your pregnant wife is outside, Mr. Vanderbilt," someone shouted from a staff table. I recognized the voice of Denise, my secretary. It was the final blow. Marina shot up from her seat, knocking her chair over. Her face, once pale, was now flushed with humiliation and rage. She looked at her husband, then at her father, finally connecting all the pieces. When her eyes met mine, I saw something break in them. "You knew," she whispered. It wasn't a question. Scandal at wedding of the year. Tycoons implicated in multi-million-dollar kickback scheme, blared the front-page headline of the newspaper I was reading 2 days later, sitting on the balcony of my apartment. The photos showed Grayson being escorted out of the plaza by police officers, my father with a suit jacket over his head, trying to escape the photographers. The U.S. Attorney's operation had been launched minutes after the scandal erupted in the ballroom. Perfect timing, though not in the way it had been planned. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, curious acquaintances, even patients wanting to confirm if the psychologist involved in the Miller case was really me. I turned it off, unable to deal with any more drama. Paul had left the day before, packing a small bag. "I need some time to process all this," he'd said, hurt not by the scandal itself, but by the fact that I had hidden my plans from him for so long. It was fair. I needed time to process what I had done too. My mother was the first from the family to contact me. She showed up at my door 3 days after the wedding, looking as if she had aged a decade. "Why, Louisa? Why would you do this to us?" Her red, swollen eyes bore into me. I couldn't answer right away. How could I explain 7 years of bottled-up resentment? How could I justify a revenge that had spiraled out of my control, taking on a life of its own? I didn't plan for it to happen like this, I finally managed to say. A half-truth. The investigation was moving quickly. Grayson, desperate to reduce his sentence, was cooperating with the prosecutors, naming everyone involved. My father, held in custody and denied bail, remained completely silent. The papers speculated about the scale of the scheme, the politicians implicated, the millions embezzled. No one talked about the abandoned bride, the destroyed wedding, or the shattered family. That was just collateral damage, invisible to a public hungry for financial scandals. I was at my lowest point, alone in the dark apartment, when the doorbell rang again. I opened it, too drained to check who it was. Marina stood there, wearing no makeup, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, a look I would never have associated with my always impeccable sister. "Where have you been?" I asked, a wave of genuine concern washing over me. She hadn't been answering texts or calls since that night. "Around," she answered vaguely, walking in uninvited. I needed to think, to understand. She sat on the sofa, looking at me with tired but surprisingly lucid eyes. "I want you to tell me everything, Louisa. From the beginning. Not to judge you. I need to know the truth. It was because of what happened at my wedding, wasn't it?" Marina's voice was calm, devoid of the accusation I had expected. We were sitting in my small kitchen, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between us. Outside, the New York night pulsed, indifferent to our family drama. "When Dad refused to walk you down the aisle," she let the sentence hang in the air, her eyes fixed on mine. There was no reason to lie anymore. For hours, I unearthed everything. The humiliation of my wedding day, the years of resentment, the investigation into Grayson, the discoveries about our father. The only part I omitted was my original intention to use the scandal for a public revenge. Some truths are too heavy, even in moments of confession. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Marina asked when I'd finished. "About Grayson, about the other woman, about the schemes." She seemed genuinely confused. "It would have avoided so much shame. So much." Her voice trailed off. Shame. Of course that would be her first concern. The image, what other people would think. So much like our father even now. "Would you really have believed me?" I returned the question, not aggressively, but simply stating a fact. "If I had come to you with accusations against the man Dad handpicked for you, against Dad himself?" Marina looked away, the answer implicit in her silence. No, she wouldn't have. No one in the family would have ever believed the black sheep against the flawless patriarch. The sun was already rising when we finally ran out of words. Marina, exhausted, had fallen asleep on my couch. I watched her rhythmic breathing, her face relaxed in sleep, looking once again like the girl who was my playmate, before our father's blatant favoritism drove a wedge between us. I felt a wave of protectiveness mixed with guilt. What had I done? In chasing my own revenge, I had dragged the only truly innocent person in this story into the eye of the storm. "I can't go back to that house," Marina declared the next morning, staring into her coffee cup as if it held all the answers to the universe. "Not after knowing everything. The Upper East Side mansion, once a symbol of status and success, now only represented the hypocrisy that had propped up our family for decades. Can I stay here for a few days? Just until I find a place." Our mother showed up unannounced that afternoon, her eyes swollen, her posture defeated. "So this is where you are," she said to Marina, ignoring me completely. "Your father has been asking for you." The use of "your father" instead of "our father" did not escape me. The drawing of lines and assigning of blame had already begun in what was left of the Miller family. "Mom, did you know?" Marina's question hung in the air like toxic smoke. "About Dad's business. About Grayson." Our mother sank into the couch, suddenly looking small and fragile. "I didn't want to know," she finally answered. "I asked too many questions at the beginning of our marriage. Your father made it clear that certain areas were not my concern." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. The old patriarchal tactic. Compartmentalize your life so that no one but you ever has the full picture. Within a week, the unthinkable happened. We sold the Astoria apartment. Paul accepted his share in cash, putting a final end to our marriage. And with the help of a realtor friend, we found a charming old brownstone apartment in Brooklyn Heights, far enough from the Upper East Side to represent a new beginning, yet close enough that we could look after our mother, who was now facing reporters and investigators alone. "People are going to find it strange," my mother commented as we unpacked the first boxes in the new apartment. 2 sisters and their mother, all living together over the age of 30. I smiled for the first time in days. The same people who thought it was normal for a father to refuse to walk his daughter down the aisle, who applauded as he handed over family heirlooms to only one daughter, who gossiped at dinner parties about the brilliant business deals that we now know were fraudulent. My mother blushed, but Marina let out a surprisingly light laugh. "Lou's right, Mom. Maybe it's time we stopped caring what people think." The first visit to the correctional facility was harder than I had imagined. The oppressive atmosphere, the smell of cheap disinfectant, the empty stares of the other visitors, it all contributed to a sense of unreality. Were we really here to see Anthony Miller, the powerful tycoon, now wearing an inmate's uniform? "We don't have to do this today," I whispered to Marina, who looked like she was about to faint. "I can come back another day by myself." "No," she replied, straightening her shoulders. "We need to do this together." Her determination surprised me. Where was the fragile girl who had always sought approval? Perhaps the scandal had awakened a strength in Marina that even she didn't know she possessed. Or perhaps, like me, she just wanted answers that only our father could give. He looked like he had aged decades in just a few weeks. His always impeccably dyed hair now showed white roots, and his once proud face was etched with deep dark circles. But his eyes still held that unshakable certainty of a man who believes he is above the rules that govern ordinary people. "My girls," he said, his voice choked with emotion, attempting a smile that didn't reach the rest of his face. "Why?" Marina's question was simple, direct, and loaded with the pain of a life built on lies. Our father sighed, looking down at his cuffed hands as if seeing them for the first time. In the beginning, it was just small favors. Then, opportunities I couldn't pass up. By the time I realized, I was in too deep to get out. The explanation sounded rehearsed, as if he had repeated it to himself so many times he had almost come to believe it. 2 years have passed since that visit. Life has found a new rhythm in our Brooklyn Heights apartment, where the old windows frame the Manhattan skyline each evening. Mom finally moved on, traveling for the first time on her own to visit her sister in Italy. Marina discovered a surprising talent for art, showing her first paintings at the local gallery where she now works. And me? I continue to help people deal with their traumas, but now with a deeper understanding of what it means to carry a grudge for so long. Sometimes, on clear Sunday mornings, the three of us sit out on the balcony with coffee and bagels, watching the city that witnessed our fall and our reconstruction. You know what's ironic? Marina commented recently, the wind messing with her now shorter, more natural hair. We had to lose everything to finally find each other. I squeezed her hand, feeling a sense of peace I never imagined was possible. The price of my resentment was far too high, but the freedom that came afterward, that's priceless.